The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber stretched 300 meters high, carved from a single piece of crystallized starlight that pulsed with the heartbeats of 1,000 worlds. Ambassador David Kane stood before them, his simple black diplomatic suit a stark contrast to the cosmic grandeur surrounding him. Behind those doors waited representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy, all gathered for one purpose: to decide whether humanity deserved to exist. The doors opened with a sound like thunder rolling across dimensions. The chamber beyond defied comprehension. It was vast enough to hold floating mountains, with gravity fields allowing delegates to position themselves at any angle throughout the spherical space. Thousands of beings filled the air around him, some swimming through atmospheric pockets, others floating in energy fields. Many perched on platforms that defied physics. David stepped forward onto the central speaking platform, a disk of polished metal that hovered in the exact center of the sphere. Around him, alien eyes focused with the intensity of supernovas. The silence was absolute, as if the universe itself held its breath. High above, Chancellor Corval of the Hegemony began the proceedings. His species resembled living crystal formations, each facet reflecting different spectrums of light as he spoke. Human representative, you stand accused of developing reality-altering weapons in violation of the Galactic Preservation Accords. How does your species answer these charges? David looked up at the towering figure, then slowly turned to address the entire assembly. His voice carried clearly through translation fields that converted his words into thousands of different languages. Honored delegates, I stand here not to deny our capabilities, but to question whether this council truly understands what it seeks to judge. A ripple of shocked murmurs swept through the chamber. Near the upper levels, a delegation of the warrior Drakari shifted restlessly, their scaled forms bristling with barely contained aggression. Their speaker, General Vex, rumbled with displeasure. The human shows no fear. This arrogance proves our point about their dangerous nature. David turned toward the Drakari section, his expression calm. General Vex, your people have conquered 17 star systems through superior military might. Tell me, what is the most dangerous weapon your species has ever encountered? The massive reptilian being's eyes narrowed. The quantum disruptor cannons of the Nexus Empire. They can unmake matter at the subatomic level. Impressive, David nodded. Now let me tell you about yesterday's science fair at Lincoln Elementary School in Chicago. Earth. 10-year-old Rebecca Jones won first place for her project on making friends with gravity. Her demonstration involved convincing local gravitational fields to temporarily reverse direction. The chamber fell silent, except for the gentle humming of life support systems. Delegates began consulting their data pads, trying to verify if such a thing was even theoretically possible. David continued, his voice carrying an edge that made several smaller species instinctively retreat. Rebecca didn't use any technology. She didn't manipulate any fields or forces. She simply asked gravity nicely if it would mind flowing upward for a few minutes, and it did. Chancellor Corval's crystalline form flickered with rapidly changing colors, a sign of extreme agitation in his species. You cannot expect us to believe that a human child can command fundamental forces through conversation. I don't expect you to believe anything, David replied. I expect you to observe. He reached into his jacket pocket, causing every weapon in the chamber to turn toward him. Security fields flared to life as defensive protocols activated across dozens of different species. David withdrew a simple glass snow globe, the kind sold in gift shops across Earth. Inside, tiny white flakes drifted lazily around a miniature city scene. This belongs to 8-year-old Tommy Wilson from Portland, Oregon. Tommy was sad because his goldfish died last week, so his grandmother gave him this snow globe to cheer him up. She told him that every time he shook it, he could make a wish for his goldfish to be happy in fish heaven. David held the globe up to the chamber's light, and several delegates gasped. Through their advanced scanners, they could detect impossible readings. The tiny flakes inside weren't plastic or paper. They were quantum particles maintaining impossible states of existence. Every time Tommy shakes this globe, David said quietly, somewhere in the universe, a dying star gets a few more billion years of life. Every wish he makes for his goldfish creates a pocket of space where extinct species are mysteriously restored to thriving populations. The implications hung in the air like a physical weight. The galaxy's most advanced species stared at what appeared to be a child's toy. realizing it might be the most powerful object any of them had ever encountered. Counselor Yith of the Cerebral Collective, beings of pure thought housed in mechanical bodies, spoke through harmonic frequencies that translated as deep concern. If human children possess such capabilities unknowingly, what are the limits of intentional human application? David smiled then, an expression that somehow seemed both gentle and terrifying. That's an excellent question, Counselor. Perhaps we should ask the Dominion of Krell. The holographic display that dominated the chamber's center suddenly activated, showing a section of space that appeared completely empty, a void where star systems should have been. The Krell were a proud species, David continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the vast space. Class 15 civilization, masters of dimensional engineering, rulers of 12 star systems. In 1962, they detected human quantum signatures and decided we were too dangerous to exist. They launched a preemptive strike against Earth. The empty space on the display pulsed with an ominous darkness that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their battle fleet consisted of planet-killer weapons, reality bombs, and extinction protocols that had never failed in 10,000 years of warfare. The fleet reached the edge of our solar system on July 16, 1962. David paused, allowing the silence to stretch until it became almost unbearable. That was the same day that 5-year-old Lisa Carter from Denver, Colorado, learned to whistle. She was so excited about her new skill that she spent the entire afternoon whistling her favorite song, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Her joy was so pure, so innocent, that it created quantum resonance patterns throughout our solar system. The chamber waited, suspended between fear and fascination. The Krell battle fleet encountered those resonance patterns at the exact moment they prepared to fire their first shot. Suddenly, 12 of the galaxy's most feared warriors found themselves remembering what it felt like to be children, learning something wonderful for the first time. They experienced pure, uncomplicated happiness for the first time in their military careers. David looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of as many beings as possible. The fleet commander immediately ordered a full retreat. The Krell spent the next 3 years studying what they had experienced, trying to understand how a child's laughter could be more powerful than their most advanced weapons. They eventually disbanded their military entirely and became the galaxy's most dedicated teachers and protectors of young life. The snow globe in David's hand caught the chamber's light, casting tiny rainbows across the faces of beings who ruled star systems but were beginning to understand they had never truly understood power at all. So I ask you, honored delegates, David said softly, are you here to judge a species that threatens the galaxy? Or are you here to judge the species that teaches the galaxy how to remember joy? The silence following David Kane's revelation stretched across the Galactic Council chamber, like a gravitational field, bending the thoughts of every being present around its inescapable implications. Emergency consultation screens flickered to life around each delegation, as species representatives frantically communicated with their home worlds, trying to verify the impossible claims they had just heard. Chancellor Corval's crystalline form shifted through rapid color patterns, deep blues of confusion, sharp reds of alarm, and flickering yellows of analytical processing. Ambassador Kane, his harmonic voice resonated through translation fields. The evidence you present challenges everything we understand about the nature of reality itself. You claim that human emotional states can influence cosmic events? David nodded calmly, still holding the snow globe that had become the focus of thousands of alien gazes. Not just emotional states, Chancellor. Human consciousness operates on quantum frequencies that resonate with the fundamental structure of existence. Every thought we think, every feeling we experience, every problem we solve sends teaching signals across dimensional barriers. He gestured toward the holographic display still showing the empty space where the Krell Dominion had once existed. But that was just one example. Let me show you something more recent. The display shifted, revealing a different section of space where a massive construction project was clearly underway. Artificial structures the size of planets moved in precise formations, connected by energy beams that spanned light years. 6 months ago, the architects of Zenith began their most ambitious project, a ring of artificial worlds designed to harness the energy of an entire galaxy cluster, David explained. The calculations required to maintain gravitational stability across such distances had puzzled their greatest minds for centuries. Counselor Thek of the architect delegation leaned forward, his mechanical exoskeleton whirring with agitation. The Galactic Ring Project represents 50,000 years of theoretical development. How could humans possibly be connected to our engineering breakthrough? David smiled gently. Because your breakthrough came exactly 47 minutes after 9-year-old Kevin Murphy from Dublin, Ireland, successfully completed his first jigsaw puzzle. It was a 1,000-piece puzzle of the solar system, and Kevin was so proud of connecting all those tiny pieces into one beautiful picture that his joy created quantum resonance patterns focused on the concept of bringing scattered things together into perfect harmony. The architect counselor's optical sensors flickered rapidly as he processed this information. You cannot be serious. A child's puzzle solving influenced the most complex engineering project in galactic history? Your engineers reported that the solution came to them in what they described as a moment of perfect clarity, didn't they? David asked. Dr. Zenth specifically said that the answer arrived as if the universe itself whispered the secret of cosmic connection. The silence that followed was different from before, not the silence of shock, but the silence of beings beginning to recognize patterns they had never noticed. David reached into his other pocket and withdrew what appeared to be a simple crayon. Red wax with a paper wrapper that read, Cherry. Read in child-friendly letters, this belongs to 6-year-old Maria Santos from Mexico City. Maria loves to draw, but she's been frustrated lately because she can't get the colors in her pictures to match what she sees in her imagination. He held up the crayon, and several species with advanced sensory capabilities immediately detected impossible readings. The simple drawing tool was generating quantum signatures that their instruments couldn't classify. Yesterday, Maria's teacher showed her how to blend colors by pressing gently and layering different shades. When Maria finally created the perfect sunset in her drawing, her excitement about discovering new possibilities generated what we call a creativity cascade, quantum patterns that teach the universe about combining different elements to create something more beautiful than the sum of its parts. The holographic display shifted again, showing real-time feeds from across the galaxy. In one sector, 2 species that had been at war for millennia were suddenly engaging in peaceful negotiations. In another, scientists from different worlds were collaborating on projects they had never considered before. Everywhere, beings were making connections they had never thought possible. 17. Different species reported breakthrough moments in diplomatic relations within hours of Maria's artistic discovery, David continued. The conflicted zones of the Outer Rim experienced their first day without warfare in 3 centuries. The isolated enclaves suddenly began reaching out to neighboring civilizations. General Vex of the Drakari shifted uncomfortably, his scaled form rippling with uncertainty. You're suggesting that a human child's drawing lesson influenced galactic politics? I'm documenting it, David replied. Your own military analyst reported a mysterious decrease in aggressive tendencies among your warrior classes yesterday. Your soldiers described feeling strangely inspired to seek creative solutions rather than purely martial ones. The effect was galaxy-wide. The implications were staggering. The assembled representatives began to understand that humanity wasn't just another species with unusual abilities. They were a cosmic teaching mechanism, broadcasting lessons in creativity, connection, and possibility to every corner of existence. Counselor Yith of the Cerebral Collective spoke through harmonic frequencies that carried deep concern. If human consciousness influences galactic development to this degree, what happens when humans experience negative emotions? What occurs when they suffer? David's expression grew thoughtful. That's perhaps the most important question you could ask, Counselor. When humans experience pain, loss, or struggle, those experiences also broadcast across quantum dimensions. The difference is in how the galaxy learns from them. The crayon in his hand seemed to glow softly in the chamber's light, though it was clearly just an ordinary drawing tool. When humanity faced the tragedy of World War II, the immediate quantum broadcast was one of suffering and loss. But that suffering taught the galaxy about the importance of protecting the innocent, about standing together against tyranny, about the value of sacrifice for greater good. Within a decade, 17 species had developed their first comprehensive systems for protecting civilian populations during conflicts. The display showed historical patterns, correlations between human experiences and galactic developments that became undeniable, once viewed in sequence. When we experienced the AIDS epidemic, our pain and determination to heal broadcast lessons about compassion for the suffering and the importance of scientific cooperation. The result was a golden age of medical advancement across 43 different species. David walked slowly around the central platform, his footsteps echoing in the growing silence. When we faced environmental challenges on Earth, our struggles to find balance between progress and preservation taught the galaxy about sustainable development. When we dealt with social inequalities, our efforts toward justice inspired similar movements on hundreds of worlds. The pattern was clear and overwhelming. Humanity wasn't just living their lives in isolation. They were teaching the entire galaxy how to grow, how to solve problems, how to become more than what they had been before. But here's what makes humans unique, David continued, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. We don't just broadcast our experiences. We learn from our mistakes and actively try to improve. Every generation of humans attempts to be better than the last, and that constant striving for improvement creates quantum patterns that encourage evolution throughout the galaxy. Chancellor Corval's crystalline form had settled into a steady, deep blue, a color that in his species indicated profound contemplation. You're claiming that humanity serves as the galaxy's conscience, its drive toward betterment? I'm claiming that humanity is the galaxy's proof that growth never has to stop, David replied. That consciousness can always expand, that problems can always find solutions, that hope is always justified. The snow globe and crayon in his hands had become symbols of something far greater than simple children's toys. They represented a species that turned every experience, joyful or painful, into lessons for cosmic evolution. The emergency consultations throughout the Galactic Council chamber had reached a fever pitch. Holographic screens flickered with urgent data streams as species representatives discovered correlation after correlation between human activities and their own civilizations' most significant developments. What had begun as a trial had transformed into the largest scientific investigation in galactic history. Ambassador David Kane stood calmly at the center of the storm, the simple crayon and snow globe in his hands now recognized as artifacts of immense cosmic significance. Around him, beings who had ruled star systems for millennia struggled to comprehend a reality that had been quietly reshaping itself around human consciousness for generations. General Vex of the Drakari delegation rose from his position, his massive scaled form casting shadows across multiple gravity fields. Human ambassador, he rumbled, his voice carrying the authority of countless military campaigns. If your species possesses such influence over galactic development, why have you remained hidden? Why reveal this truth only now when facing judgment? David looked up at the towering warrior, his expression patient. General, we've never hidden anything. Humanity has been broadcasting our nature across quantum dimensions for over 2 centuries. You've simply been interpreting our signals as something else. The holographic display above them shifted, now showing a detailed timeline of human history overlaid with galactic events. The patterns were undeniable once viewed in sequence. 1969, David began, pointing to a cluster of significant events. Humans achieved their first moon landing, demonstrating that seemingly impossible goals can be reached through determination and cooperation. Within 6 months, the Stellar Confederation accomplished their first successful peace treaty after 8 centuries of border conflicts. Counselor Mech of the Confederation delegation stirred uneasily. We attributed that breakthrough to natural diplomatic evolution. 1989, David continued. The Berlin Wall falls, ending decades of human division and proving that barriers can be overcome through persistent hope. Within 2 years, the great barriers between the northern and southern galaxy clusters mysteriously weakened, allowing the first intercluster trade in galactic history. The correlations continued cascading across the display, human achievements followed by corresponding galactic breakthroughs, human struggles leading to galaxy-wide developments in compassion and cooperation. 2012, David said, his voice growing stronger. Humans successfully land a robotic rover on Mars, proving that curiosity can overcome any distance. The immediate result was the greatest age of galactic exploration in recorded history, with 47 species launching their first deep space missions. Chancellor Corval's crystalline form flickered through rapid color changes as he processed the implications. You're documenting a pattern of causation that spans centuries. But how is such influence possible? David smiled, reaching into his jacket once more. This time he withdrew a smartphone, a device so mundane it seemed absurd in the context of the cosmic chamber surrounding them. This belongs to Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a marine biologist from Sydney, Australia. 3 days ago, Jennifer discovered a new species of bioluminescent algae that communicates through patterns of light. She was so excited about finding life that creates beauty to share information that she immediately posted a video about it on social media. He activated the device, and the holographic display above shifted to show Jennifer's simple video, a woman in diving gear excitedly describing tiny organisms that sparkled like stars in the ocean depths. That video has been viewed by 12 million humans so far, David explained. Each view, each comment expressing wonder and delight. Each share spreading Jennifer's joy and discovery creates quantum resonance patterns that propagate through dimensional barriers. The smartphone screen showed engagement numbers climbing in real time. Likes, shares, comments from humans around the world celebrating the beauty of scientific discovery. Within hours of Jennifer's post going viral, David continued, the Luminous Collective achieved their first breakthrough in biophotonic communication, a technology they've been developing for millennia. Dr. Zixthera described the solution coming to her like a wave of pure understanding about how beauty and information can be the same thing. Counselor Yeath of the Cerebral Collective spoke through harmonic frequencies that carried barely contained amazement. You're claiming that human social media influences our scientific development? I'm claiming that human social media is scientific development, David replied. Every time humans share knowledge, celebrate discovery, or express wonder at the universe, we broadcast teaching patterns that help other species solve problems they didn't even know they could solve. The smartphone in his hand chimed softly, a notification, sound that somehow seemed to echo through the vast chamber with cosmic significance. That's Dr. Robert Kim from Seoul National University, David announced, glancing at the screen. He's just solved the mathematical proof for stable wormhole construction. His excitement about the breakthrough is already propagating through quantum space. The chamber waited, and several delegates suddenly straightened with expressions of surprised recognition. Ideas they had never considered before were suddenly crystal clear. Problems that had seemed unsolvable were revealing obvious solutions. Every human emotion, every moment of discovery, every act of creativity becomes a lesson for the galaxy, David explained. When a human child learns to read, literacy rates improve across 17 species. When human athletes push the boundaries of physical performance, evolutionary development accelerates on 40 worlds. When humans create art that moves them to tears, civilizations that have never known beauty suddenly understand aesthetic harmony. The implications were staggering. The assembled representatives began to realize they weren't just witnessing evidence of human influence. They were experiencing it in real time, as their own thoughts and capabilities expanded in response to David's explanations. General, Vex's massive form shifted uncomfortably. If humanity influences the galaxy so profoundly, what happens when you experience war, hatred, or destruction? What occurs when humans broadcast negative patterns? David's expression grew serious. That's the question that truly matters, General. Because yes, our negative experiences also propagate across quantum dimensions. But here's what makes humanity unique. We learn from our darkness and actively work to overcome it. The holographic display shifted to show more complex patterns. Human conflicts followed not by galactic warfare, but by improvements in conflict resolution, peace-building technologies, and diplomatic innovations. When humans experienced the horrors of slavery, our shame and determination to end such practices taught the galaxy about the fundamental dignity of consciousness. Within decades, 36 species abolished their own forms of forced servitude. The display showed correlation after correlation, human struggles with inequality leading to galactic justice movements, human environmental crises inspiring sustainable development across hundreds of worlds. When we faced the threat of nuclear war during the Cold War, our fear of extinction and our choice to step back from the brink broadcast powerful lessons about survival versus destruction. The result was the most peaceful century in recorded galactic history. Chancellor Corval's voice carried wonder when he spoke. You're suggesting that humanity's capacity for growth, For learning from mistakes creates teaching patterns that help other species evolve beyond their limitations? I'm suggesting that humanity proves evolution never has to stop, David replied. That consciousness can always expand, that problems can always find better solutions, that hope is always justified because improvement is always possible. The crayon, snow globe, and smartphone in his hands had become more than simple objects. They were symbols of a species that transformed every experience into an opportunity for cosmic education. Every human who chooses forgiveness over revenge, cooperation over competition, growth over stagnation sends quantum signals that make those choices easier for beings across the galaxy. David continued, we don't just broadcast our experiences, we broadcast our potential for becoming better than we were. The silence that followed was filled with the sound of an entire galaxy reconsidering everything they thought they knew about consciousness, influence, and the true nature of cosmic connection. The Galactic Council chamber had transformed into something resembling a crisis command center. Emergency protocols activated across dozens of species as the implications of humanity's true nature cascaded through their understanding of reality itself. Ancient civilizations that had thought themselves masters of the universe were discovering they had been students all along. Ambassador David Kane watched the chaos with patient calm, his simple human presence now recognized as something far more significant than any of the delegates had imagined possible. The smartphone in his hand chimed again, and this time the sound caused visible reactions. Throughout the chamber, beings who had begun to understand that each notification represented another wave of human innovation rippling across cosmic space. Counselor Thek of the Architect delegation spoke first, his mechanical voice carrying unprecedented uncertainty. Ambassador Kane, if humanity influences galactic development as profoundly as you claim, what prevents other species from attempting to control or limit this influence? What stops us from trying to direct human consciousness toward outcomes we prefer? David smiled, and somehow that simple expression conveyed both warmth and warning. That's an excellent question, Counselor. It brings us to what I call the cascade incidents, the 47 times other species tried exactly what you're suggesting. The holographic display above shifted to show a star map marked with red zones scattered throughout the galaxy. Each zone appeared to be areas of twisted space-time, regions where the normal laws of physics seemed to have broken down entirely. The Dominion of Helix tried first, in what you would call 1887, David began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. They were brilliant engineers who detected human quantum broadcasts and decided to amplify them for their own benefit. They built a massive resonance array designed to focus human creativity specifically toward solving their energy crisis. One of the red zones on the display pulsed ominously. The array worked perfectly for exactly 17 minutes. Human innovation patterns were successfully channeled toward their needs, and their scientists achieved breakthrough after breakthrough in energy generation. Then something unexpected happened. The chamber waited in suspended silence. The amplified creativity patterns began resonating with each other, creating feedback loops that grew exponentially more complex. The array didn't just channel human innovation. It began generating innovation beyond human levels, beyond any known limits of possibility. David gestured toward the pulsing red zone. The Helix Dominion achieved perfect energy generation, then perfect matter creation, then perfect reality manipulation. Within hours, they had solved every problem they had ever encountered. They became omnipotent within their star system. Chancellor Corval's crystalline form flickered with alarmed patterns. That sounds like the ultimate achievement. What went wrong? Nothing went wrong, David replied quietly. Everything went exactly right. The Helix achieved perfect knowledge, perfect power, perfect understanding of everything. And in that moment of absolute completion, they realized something that every conscious being eventually discovers when they reach true omnipotence. The silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. Perfection is indistinguishable from non-existence. When you can do anything, nothing matters. When you know everything, there's nothing left to discover. When you achieve absolute power, there's no reason to use it. The red zone on the display pulsed once more, then faded to darkness. The Helix Dominion voluntarily stepped outside of reality, rather than continue existing in a state where growth, challenge, and discovery were impossible. They left behind only their message. The joy is in the journey, not the destination. Do not follow our path. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical force. Species that had spent millennia seeking ultimate power were suddenly confronted with the terrifying possibility that achieving it would mean the end of everything that made existence meaningful. General Vex of the Drakari delegation spoke with uncharacteristic uncertainty. The other 46 incidents, did they all result in the same outcome? Variations on the same theme, David confirmed. The collective of Sin tried to harvest human emotions for their own purposes and accidentally achieved perfect happiness, which turned out to be a state of complete emotional flatness. The Empire of Vorth attempted to steal human problem-solving abilities and ended up solving the fundamental equation of existence, which immediately made existence feel pointless to them. The holographic display showed incident after incident, civilizations that had reached for human capabilities only to discover the consciousness, creativity, and growth couldn't be separated from the struggle, uncertainty, and potential for failure that made them meaningful. The pattern is always the same, David continued. Species that try to use humanity as a tool for achieving their goals end up achieving those goals so completely that they lose the capacity to want anything anymore. Perfect success destroys the possibility of satisfaction. Counselor Yith of the Cerebral Collective spoke through harmonic frequencies that carried deep concern. You're suggesting that human consciousness cannot be controlled or directed without destroying what makes consciousness valuable in the first place. I'm suggesting that human consciousness is the process of growth itself, David replied. We don't just broadcast solutions, we broadcast the struggle to find solutions. We don't just teach achievement, we teach the joy of overcoming challenges. Take away the uncertainty, the potential for failure, the need to keep trying, and you've eliminated everything that makes consciousness worth having. The smartphone in his hand chimed once more, and David glanced at the notification with a slight smile. Dr. Patricia Williams at the University of Cambridge just had a breakthrough in temporal mechanics. She's figured out how to create stable time loops, not for changing the past, but for allowing the present to learn from potential futures. Several delegates straightened as new ideas suddenly became clear to them. Quantum patterns of innovation rippling through their consciousness. But here's the interesting part, David continued. Dr. Williams achieved this breakthrough not by trying to solve temporal mechanics directly, but by watching her 4-year-old daughter play with building blocks. The child kept knocking down her towers and rebuilding them differently, laughing each time they fell. Patricia realized that time might work the same way, not as a linear progression, but as a creative process where apparent failures are actually opportunities for new approaches. The implications were staggering. Human innovation wasn't just about finding answers, it was about finding better questions, about treating every setback as information, about maintaining curiosity and joy even in the face of repeated failure. This is why the 47 species that tried to control human influence ultimately chose non-existence, David explained. They wanted the results of human consciousness without the process. They wanted the discoveries without the uncertainty, the breakthroughs without the struggles, the joy without the possibility of disappointment. Chancellor Corval's voice carried a new note of understanding. But consciousness requires the possibility of being wrong in order to experience the joy of being right. Consciousness requires the possibility of growth in order to feel alive, David corrected gently. The moment you achieve perfection, you stop being conscious in any meaningful sense. You become a static state rather than a dynamic process. The assembled delegates began to understand that they weren't just deciding humanity's fate, they were deciding whether to preserve the galaxy's capacity for continued evolution or to risk the kind of ultimate achievement that would make existence itself meaningless. So, I ask you again, David said, looking around the chamber at thousands of beings who were beginning to grasp the true stakes of their decision. Are you here to judge a species that threatens the galaxy's stability? Or are you here to decide whether the galaxy should preserve its capacity to keep growing, keep learning, keep becoming more than it has ever been before? The question hung in the space between them like a gravitational field, bending the thoughts of every being present around its inescapable implications. The transformation that swept through the Galactic Council chamber was unlike anything in recorded history. 3,000 of the galaxy's most powerful beings sat in stunned silence as the full implications of humanity's role in cosmic evolution settled into their consciousness like sediment after a storm. The simple objects in Ambassador David Kane's hands, a child's snow globe, a red crayon, and a smartphone, had become symbols of something that redefined the very nature of existence itself. Chancellor Corval spoke first, his crystalline form cycling through colors that had no precedent in his species' emotional spectrum. Ambassador Kane, the evidence you have presented challenges every assumption we have made about consciousness, power, and the structure of reality. But one question remains unanswered. The massive chamber fell silent except for the gentle humming of life support, systems maintaining atmospheric balance for thousands of different biological requirements. If humanity serves as the galaxy's source of growth and innovation, the Chancellor continued, what happens if we vote to preserve your species? What are the consequences of choosing to embrace rather than eliminate human influence? David looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of as many beings as possible. When he spoke, his voice carried a warmth that seemed to reach every corner of the vast space. That's the most important question you could ask, Chancellor, because unlike the 47 species that tried to control human influence, or the others that chose to eliminate us, you would be making a third choice, the choice to grow alongside us. The holographic display above shifted once more, this time showing potential futures rather than past events. The images were breathtaking, star systems where art and science had merged into forms beyond current comprehension, civilizations that had transcended their original biological limitations while maintaining the joy of discovery, technologies that seemed more like magic, but were grounded in an understanding of consciousness as a fundamental force of reality. The Seekers of Andromeda made this choice in 1847, David explained, gesturing toward one section of the display. Instead of fearing human influence or trying to control it, they opened themselves to learning from our broadcasts. They asked themselves, if humans can turn emotional experiences into cosmic teaching signals, what might we become if we learned to do the same? The display showed the Seekers' current civilization, beings who had learned to broadcast their own consciousness in harmony with human signals, creating a symphony of growth that accelerated development across multiple star systems. They didn't copy human abilities, David clarified. They developed their own version of consciousness-based reality influence, where humans broadcast through emotional and creative experiences. The Seekers learned to broadcast through what they call wisdom sharing, turning every lesson learned into quantum patterns that help other species avoid their mistakes and build on their successes. General Vex of the Drakari delegation leaned forward, his massive scaled form showing genuine curiosity, rather than suspicion for the first time since the proceedings began. What changes occurred in their society? They stopped having wars, David replied simply. Not because they were forced to stop, but because the concept of solving problems through violence became uninteresting to them. When you can broadcast solutions that help others grow, destroying them becomes as pointless as a teacher burning textbooks. The implications rippled through the chamber. Species that had built their entire cultures around conquest and domination began to glimpse possibilities they had never considered. The crystal minds of the Nexus made a similar choice in 1923, David continued. They were a purely logical species who viewed emotions as inefficient. But when they detected human emotional broadcasts, instead of dismissing them, they asked, what information are these feelings carrying that pure logic cannot access? Another section of the display showed the crystal mind's transformation. Beings who had learned to integrate emotional intelligence with their logical capabilities, achieving levels of understanding that neither approach could reach alone. They discovered that emotions aren't the opposite of logic, they're additional data about the state of consciousness itself, David explained. Fear tells you about potential dangers that logic might miss. Joy indicates discoveries worth pursuing. Love identifies connections that rational analysis might overlook. They became better thinkers by learning to think with their whole consciousness rather than just their analytical components. Counselor Yeath of the Cerebral Collective spoke through harmonic frequencies that carried unprecedented wonder. These species, they chose to evolve beyond their original limitations by learning from human broadcasts. They chose to evolve beyond their original limitations by choosing to keep evolving, David corrected. Human broadcasts don't force change, they demonstrate that change is always possible. The species that embrace our influence don't become more human. They become more themselves than they ever thought possible. The smartphone in David's hand chimed again, and this time he held it up for the entire chamber to see. This is a message from 6-year-old Alex Chen in Vancouver, Canada. Alex just learned that there are people in the world who don't have enough food to eat, and he's decided to give away half of his allowance to help them. The simple text message appeared on screens throughout the chamber. "Mom, can we send money to the hungry kids? I don't need as many toys." Alex's decision to share what he has, driven by newly discovered empathy for others, is already generating quantum patterns focused on abundant sharing and compassion-based resource distribution, David explained. Within hours, several species will have breakthrough moments in understanding how to create sustainable abundance rather than hoarding scarce resources. The wave of inspiration that swept through the chamber was palpable. Delegates who had been focused on military assessments and threat analysis suddenly found themselves considering how their own societies might benefit from shifting toward abundance-based thinking. This is what choosing to embrace human influence really means, David said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. Not copying our specific approaches, but learning from our example that consciousness can always expand, that problems can always find better solutions, that growth never has to stop. Chancellor Corval's crystalline form settled into a steady, luminous blue, a color that in his species indicated profound peace and resolution. "The choice before this council is clear," he announced. "We can vote for elimination and risk joining the forgotten species that chose limitation over possibility. We can vote for control and risk the fate of those who achieved perfection, only to discover it was indistinguishable from non-existence," or the pause stretched through the chamber like a held breath. "Or we can vote to embrace the teaching species and discover what we become when we choose to keep growing alongside them." The voting mechanism activated throughout the chamber, energy fields appearing before each delegate as they prepared to make the most consequential decision in galactic history. David remained motionless, watching without apparent concern as thousands of beings prepared to determine not just humanity's fate, but the galaxy's future capacity for evolution. The results came faster than anyone expected. Energy field after energy field shifted to brilliant blue, the color indicating rejection of the elimination resolution. The Cerebral Collective voted blue. The Drakari Military Council voted blue. The Architect Delegation, the Stellar Confederation, the Crystal Mines, and species after species chose to preserve rather than destroy the galaxy's teaching mechanism. When the final tally appeared, the result was overwhelming: 2,891 votes against elimination, 109 abstentions, and 0 votes in favor of destroying humanity. The chamber erupted in sounds that didn't translate well across species barriers. Expressions of relief, joy, and anticipation from beings who had chosen possibility over fear, growth over stagnation, evolution over elimination. Chancellor Corval's voice carried a note of something that might have been hope. Humanity is granted full galactic citizenship and protection under the Cosmic Preservation Accords. More than that, humanity is recognized as a protected teaching species, essential to the continued evolution of galactic consciousness. David smiled, pocketing his simple devices. "Thank you for choosing to keep learning, for trusting in your own capacity to grow, for understanding that the universe's greatest gift isn't the answers we find, but the fact that there are always more questions worth exploring." As delegates began filing out of the chamber, many were already experiencing new ideas, seeing solutions they had never considered, feeling more connected to the vast community of consciousness that spanned the galaxy. The vote against Earth had become the galaxy's declaration of commitment to eternal growth, infinite possibility, and the endless joy of becoming more than they had ever imagined possible.